My name is Carl Vonderau, and the name of my book is Murderabilia. My main character in Murderabilia is named William MacNary, and he's been hiding a terrible secret. When he was 8 years old, his father was arrested for killing 13 women. Not only did he kill them, but he made famous black and white photos of their rearranged bodies. Those photos actually started the Murderabilia market, and he's infamous. Now, 31 years later, William has his own family. He's changed his name. He lives in California, and he thinks that he is now beyond that terrible history in his father's infamy. Then he gets a call, and someone on the phone says, "I know who you really are, and I'm your brother." That tears apart William's reconstructed life, and soon the killings begin, and William becomes a suspect.
Book lovers unite! I'm Demethius Jackson, and you're listening to the Chapter 1 podcast. The greatest stories ever written all begin with Chapter 1. In each episode, our guest authors will share their first chapters with you. Hey everybody, how's it going? On today's episode, I'm going to be speaking with Carl Vonderau, the author of the new book entitled Murderabilia. We always read and watch stories about murderers and killers, but it's very rare that we get a chance to delve into the effects it has on their family. And that's what this book is about. And that's also what makes it so interesting. So, without further ado, here we go. Carl Vonderau, Murderabilia, starts right now.
I manage secrets. Sometimes my clients take years to reveal them. Hidden trusts for mistresses and drug-addled kids, weddings held up for months or years because someone's beloved refused to sign a prenuptial agreement. Once I helped a dying business owner design an estate plan that forced his first wife's children to be civil to his second wife, or they'd lose their inheritance. Over the years, I've learned that my biggest value is not my expertise, but my discretion. The clients at our bank count on me to stay in the background, but always be close at hand. They appreciate that I buy my suits at Macy's and drive a Camry instead of a BMW or red sports coupe. Of course, there are the usual loan requests, but any banker can handle those. Even the 26-year-olds who hone their sales skills by hawking magazines can get loans approved for the families I work with. But only a special banker can protect the client's secrets. Our bank sits discreetly on the 10th floor of a modern building, but our offices are designed to look like an old house that one wealthy descendant has passed down to the next. Oil paintings cling to the damask wallpaper beside antique sconces and handmade stands that hold wooden umbrellas and canes. The conference rooms have couches with throw pillows. Coffee table books of impressionist painters lie open on the vintage tables. When our clients visit us, they're supposed to feel as if they're chatting up the kind of trustworthy and cultured friend who would never need their money. My career, my life, was carefully constructed to appear normal until 2 years ago. That's when a simple cell phone call unraveled the layers of my facade. When I answered, I was standing beneath the glass cupola in our bank's main hallway. A voice distorted beyond recognition said, "William MacNary, that's not your real name, is it, Tex?" I pushed my palm against the wall to steady myself. Tex was my childhood nickname when we lived in Illinois, the name my father gave me. Do you ever think about hands? You thought about hands a lot, your daddy did. Right, Tex? You there? An electric warble could have been a laugh. Who is this, I asked. Your brother. The only one who really knows you. The line went dead. I don't have a brother. I stumbled down the hallway toward the bank's reception area. I could go down the elevators and get some air, but instead I turned and lurched the other direction toward the fake French doors that led into the banking department. Passing the rows of offices inside, I was aware of Ambrose Hines pitching on the phone, her index finger jabbing each benefit in the air. I ducked into the cover of my own office. With my doors shut, I sank my head into my hands. The whole country knew of Harvey Dean Cogan, but no one suspected that I was his son. My boss and clients would be shocked. Why didn't you tell us? What about the bank's reputation? But worst of all was what this might do to my kids. No child should grow up knowing that monster was part of their family. I grabbed my briefcase from the floor and stuffed a leather notebook inside. When I reached the garage, I saw something jammed under my Camry's wiper. A plain white envelope. At first, I thought it was a notice of new parking fees, but nothing was stuck to any other car's windshield. My breath came faster. I wrenched out the envelope and hit the button for the automatic door locks. I leaned over to check the back seat. Only then did I climb into the driver's seat and open the envelope. A drawing lay folded inside, or rather, it was a printed copy of a drawing of hands. I kicked the underside of the dashboard and shouted. I crumpled the paper and whipped it against the car's windshield. For 31 years, I dreaded exactly this. Someone would find us. Someone would torment us. I just never knew how or when. Everyone has seen that drawing. In the Durer pen and ink sketch, two grayish-blue hands reach out from sleeves folded over into cuffs, the fingers straight and touching in prayer. Only the praying apostle's hands and sleeves are visible, as if his forearms have detached from his body to hover in the air. It's universally known as the praying hands. In the version that appeared on my car, black words stood out on the light blue background. Repent and accept your Savior. I peeled out of the garage. 15 minutes later, my Camry sat wedged in traffic. San Diego's drought-stricken hills rising like brown hands around me. I had to calm down, to shapeshift into the unruffled father my family knew. I had to stop gulping air.
Wow, thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
So before I actually read your book, I hadn't actually heard of the term murderabilia. Can you explain what that is?
It's like memorabilia, but it's associated with serial killers. It's mostly artwork that has been produced by serial killers, usually in prison. And this artwork is donated by the killers to brokers and dealers around the world, really. And they buy and sell this stuff. And it can be anything, not only paintings, it can be hair, it can be fingernail clippings, it can be shoes. There's a huge market for this. Actually, I saw on one of these dealers that a painting by John Wayne Gacy of his house in the crawl space. He's the one that killed, I don't know how many boys in Chicago many years ago, and he was put to death in 94. He buried these boys in his crawl space. So this painting of his house in crawl spaces was for sale for $175,000.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, essentially, this is a pretty lucrative business.
Yeah, it is. It is. And people have been trying to outlaw it. States have put up legislation to try and outlaw it, but none have succeeded. And in fact, in 2001, the Supreme Court declared that many of those state laws were unconstitutional. Freedom of speech.
Freedom of speech.
Yeah.
Strikes again. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, how did you first become interested in the subject of murderabilia, especially to write about it?
Well, I didn't actually, because, the way the process works, I try to combine a lot of things. My work has a lot of layers. So I began to do the author's what if question. And that question was, if a private banker had a terrible secret, what kind of secret would that be? And then I thought of, well, suppose his father's a serial killer. And then to make it even worse, suppose his father's an infamous serial killer. And how could it be what his father did be truly despicable, have him take pictures of his victims? Then I started to look on the web and I discovered Murderabilia, that this stuff actually exists out there. So that's how how it came into the book.
Yeah, just one layer kind of led into the other.
Yeah.
What I do like about your book is that you're actually not focusing so much on the murderer, but on the child of the murderer and how he was affected, how his life was affected by the actions of his father. And that's not a perspective that you hear about very often.
No, it's not. And I find this a fascinating perspective because the children, in effect, are other victims because they have to live with the stigma of what one of their parents did, usually the father. And society tends to blame them for what their parents did. How could you not know? Didn't you see the evidence? Come on, you must have known.
Right.
Particularly in the wives, too. How could the mother have not known? And when you look at some of the accounts of actual children of serial killers, like the daughter of Dennis Rader, who's the bind, torture, and kill guy in Oklahoma, or the daughter of Keith Jesperson, the happy face killer, they had no idea. And actually, Rader's daughter, the first she ever suspected anything was when the FBI knocked on her door to tell her father had killed all these people.
Wow.
She felt as if her whole life was a lie.
And in a sense, it was.
It was, yeah. Yeah. So she compares it now. I mean, she's married, she's got children. She turned to religion, helped her recover. She's written a book. She compares it, though, to PTSD, those years when she felt the guilt of what he'd done.
Yeah. It's also what I imagine is the headspace of William MacNary, your main character, because there's a lot to unpack within that very first chapter. Even on the first page, when we realize that he's a banker who's used to handling secrets, but in reality, his whole life is one big secret that he's been trying to protect.
That's right. And he's trying to protect his children from this legacy.
Yeah.
Can you imagine you've got a 5-year-old daughter and a 7-year-old son, and somebody comes up in the park and says, "Oh, I hear your grandpa's Harvey Dean Kogan. Are you like him?" No.
Yeah, that can be unnerving. What do you do in that sense? I guess you just change your name and move to a new city.
Well, and even the actual people are very careful about how they reveal it to their children. And so William is trying to protect his kids from all of this. His wife knows, but they're both trying to just live a normal, uneventful life, but they can't. And he has struggled his whole life to come to terms with it and to seize the narrative of his father's hobby, photography, in his own life as well.
Yeah.
William became an actual photojournalist. And instead of taking black and white pictures, he took color pictures to try and really make his life his own.
What was the relationship like between William and his father? Because, I mean, for example, you mentioned that his nickname was Tex, and that was a nickname his father gave him. So it kind of insinuates that maybe they had a good relationship.
They did. And you look at these other children, they often had wonderful relationships. Well, not wonderful, but good relationships with their fathers. In the case of William, his father would play with him. They'd wrestle, they'd throw rocks, they'd pretend monsters. They do all the things that a father would do with a child.
And then all of a sudden, this other thing comes out of nowhere.
Yeah, it's not totally out of nowhere because his mother is a devout Christian Scientist. So there's all kinds of power games and control games being played between his father and his mother.
I do like the parallels that you draw between William and his father. I mean, for example, as you mentioned, with the photography. And it just so happens that, William is a photographer as well. So I'm wondering without revealing too much of the story, what other ways is he kind of compensating? Is that the word?
Yeah, well, he's keeping a secret life. The photography is important because he looked up all his father's photographs to try and figure out what made his father do what he did, and to understand it and to see what his father's evil was. So he's had that kind of relationship with his father's photography. He's trying to have a good family and a good relationship with his wife, which is in some ways compensates for what the kind of childhood he had to live. But at the same time, he's keeping this secret from everyone.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think you do a great job with exploring the emotions that he's experiencing, because on the one hand, as you mentioned, he's trying to protect his family from his past. But I think on the other hand, he's also trying to protect himself from, what he may become.
Yes. Yeah, he's worried that he carries the genes, that there's something that's going to explode inside him. And he's going to become like his father. His whole life, he's worried about this. Even when he did the photography, he kind of mirrored some of the following of women and taking photographs of them to see if something would happen inside him that he couldn't control or see what it was.
What was your writing process like? How were you able to really get into the headspace of William and the rest of the characters?
Well, I was part of the book is the Mother's Christian Science, where in Christian Science, for a lot of people, it is a denial of the existence of evil.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you deny that evil can have any power, it will go away, which is kind of the perfect wife for a serial killer. So that was the kind of denial that William grew up with. I was raised a Christian Scientist, so I understand how that can both protect and harm someone as they're growing up. I had to do some research, of course, on serial killers because this is the first book I've written with anything to do with a serial killer,
Mm-hmm.
and that made me want to take a shower afterwards. But it's funny, you can habituate and you kind of can deaden yourself to just about anything. And then, of course, I did all kinds of research on the children and speculated as to what that would be like.
Yeah. And you also seem to be touching on the subject of religion in the story as well, especially what you mentioned with the mother and how she was kind of denying things and, in a sense, enabling. How do you think, or how much of an impact do you think that the mother's actions had on her children?
Had a huge impact because from the time he was arrested, she refused to even talk about him or to talk about how they felt, or she wouldn't let them go to psychologists because she didn't believe in psychologists. So they never got to process their own feelings toward what their father had done, except with each other, and they were just young kids.
So there was never an
So,
opportunity to heal.
no, never an opportunity to heal. And William has been trying his whole life to heal. His sister is gay and she runs a restaurant, and the mother thinks that she's gay as a reaction and a false conception against what her father did, and so that's why she doesn't like men. So that doesn't help. And the sister thinks that the mother really, she suspected, she always suspected, and the sister will blame the mother forever.
Mm-hmm. So again, you really did create some exceptional characters. Did you yourself have a pretty interesting background, because I remember reading that you worked as a banker, but then you've also lived abroad as well. So did any of that help you in the creation of the story? Any of those experiences?
It did. My whole career was as a banker. I started out in Chicago, and then we moved to Montreal, and I've done a lot of work with Latin America and traveled there, and even traveled to North Africa as part of my bank business. So there is actually a chapter in the book about what William saw when he was a photojournalist in Algeria. And there's another chapter about when he went to Bogota to do a photojournalist spread on Bogota after Pablo Escobar, and that's where he met Jill, his wife.
Hmm.
So those all played into it.
You also do work with nonprofits as well, correct?
That's right. I'm in a group called Social Venture Partners, and it's a nationwide group. And what we are is a nonprofit that helps other nonprofits
Mm-hmm.
in terms of how they organize, how they raise funds, how they do strategic planning, how they manage their boards, all that kind of stuff. And actually, one of the groups we're helping is called Traveling Stories here in San Diego. And what they do is they set up story tents for kids to come, and they can pick out a book in the tent, read the book. They get a story buck, and then they can, when they get enough story bucks, they can cash that in for toys.
Wow.
Yeah, it's neat. It's all over San Diego. And so we're actually going to do a benefit for authors will read from children's books at a bookstore in order to benefit Traveling Stories.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. I hear a lot of new programs that are starting up that are similar. I know there's one, I'm not sure if it's in Texas or where it is, but essentially what you do is you kind of put a not necessarily a mailbox, but a book box in front of your house. And I think you have to register with the site, and people can come and they can grab books. They can put books in there, and it's just network of book sharing. There's no cards, no money involved. It's just people that are passionate about reading.
Oh, that's neat. That's
Yeah.
neat. Well, I'm also active with was active with the YMCA here as well, which is a great world organization.
So what's next for you? Because I mean, I know you have a passion with these nonprofits. Is there going to be any time for you to write another book?
Yes. Well, I'm working on another book now, and hopefully it won't take as long as this one. This one took about 4 years to write, and then it took 2 years to find a publisher, and then of course it takes a year to get it published. So the next book I'm writing from another perspective. In my books, I guess my brand is becoming that behind every crime is a family.
Mm.
And so in my next book, it's going to be talking about a father who has a very difficult son. So kind of the reverse of what we're doing in Murderabilia, son who has a very difficult father.
Cool. Well, was there anything else that you wanted to discuss?
I want to put in a plug that Midnight Ink is publishing the book. And I guess I should say where my social media handles as well.
That's what I was just about to ask you. Yeah, so where can readers go to learn more about you and your books online?
carlvonderau.com is my website. I'm on Facebook for author Carl Vonderau, and I'm on Twitter too, but not quite as active in Carl Vonderau at Carl Vonderau.
And with that, we're going to wrap up another episode. Thanks again to Carl Vonderau. If you have a question or comment for him or for me, or you know an author who you think would be a good fit for the show, let me know. Connect with me on social media. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, or you can send an email to info@ch1podcast.com. Check out our website at ch1podcast.com, where there you can listen to previous episodes and hopefully find your next favorite author. Subscribe to us on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Overcast, wherever podcasts can be downloaded. Don't forget to leave us a 5-star review, but most importantly, tell everyone you know about the show, because that is how we grow. Okay, that's it for me. Okay, that's it for me in this episode. You all stay awesome. Till next time.